The Illuminati is preparing us for the announcement that aliens exist. I'm kidding, by the way. I don't think that's true. I'm not saying I know. I'm just saying it's not all going to be skittles and rainbows.
Hi, this is Felipe Osorio, and welcome to Second Earth Alternative. Okay, so I'm just going to be straight up with you guys about this one. This one made me a little bit upset, and for various reasons. We're talking about the new Timcast, Tim Pool. If you haven't heard of, he's a commentator, basically an investigative journalist who does a lot of work with politics, but lately he has decided to tackle the topic of UFOs. And, it's one thing to tackle the topic of UFO without recourse to the actual evidence, to the actual knowledge regarding all the research related to UFO. It's a whole other thing when you presume egotistically that always aliens are probably not wrong, that people are freaking crazy. And at one time, I think he even used the term skittles and rainbows. So he stands here complaining about YouTube censoring him. Okay, you want to know what real censorship is like, Tim? Let me show you. Censorship is where you used to get 1.2 million views in a video while being demonetized for 9 months. Finally, when you're monetized, suddenly your channel drops and your stats look like this. So the last video I did on the Mars anomalous lights, which was just a couple days ago, let's just check out how many views I'm getting from recommended pages. 5.3%. This is the bread and butter for most people nowadays. This is how people get views. So I'm getting 5.3% of my measly 1,000 views from YouTube recommendations. And we've been accurately reporting on this topic for a while now. So I'm glad that you're complaining about the hundreds of thousands of views that you're getting, even though we used to get millions of views in some of our videos. And I'm glad that you're so upset about the whole Veritas project. But I'm telling you, there are people who are being censored way harder than you. I really don't appreciate when people who are not knowledgeable about the topics refer to these topics as rainbow and skittles. Enough of this nonsense. There are people who are struggling, who are suffering, trying to cover this topic way more than you are right now with your 4 channels and hundreds and thousands of views. I don't care that your video got deleted. Our channel has been proactively for a while now. So to put it bluntly, it's just freaking annoying to hear. So I'm sure I turned off a lot of people with that little rant, but let me show you what I'm talking about. So just to break up what's going on, he's talking about the Bob Lazar case. Now, he apparently believes Bob Lazar, the man spoke for 3 hours, but believes that this was, quote unquote, smoke and mirrors by the government, which once again, if you look at the research, if you look at how he came across this information, it would be very hard to conclude that when you consider some of the context that he was under. But it's okay. Let's just go ahead and play and we'll see what he says.
And they had gravity wave generators. Bob Lazar's story is really interesting. Gotta say, I don't particularly believe it because listen, man, I'm not one to believe fantastic stories. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
So once again, he falls back on that stupid quote that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If you saw my previous episode, we had made the point very adamantly that in any kind of scientific endeavor, when you're trying to discover something new, something that has never been uncovered, something that you have very little knowledge about, the last thing you ever want to do is imprint your own sense of reality into the experiment itself. You cannot say that one experiment requires an inordinate amount of more evidence than another one when you don't even know what the phenomenon is. It is a fallacy to say that you need extraordinary evidence because by nature, evidence needs to be neutral. When you imprint your thumb in an experiment, you are essentially affecting it. That is why they have double-blinded studies so that the experimenter cannot affect what is being experimented on just based on his subconscious interactions. Oh, these are supposed to be the smart rats. Oh, how cute, how cute. Oh, these are the stupid rats. Let me pick them by the tail. That very action of thinking they're stupid rats and picking them up by the tail, that can affect the experiment. Just that little thing, just that little knowledge will affect the experiment. So you're telling me that now you can completely change the entire nature of evidence. So you know what? Screw this. Quote away. Keep quoting Carl Sagan. Keep proliferating some fallacy while claiming that your channel is being heavily censored when their channels are being censored 100 times greater than yours, sir.
I think he said a lot of really interesting things, but there's a lot of ways you can explain it outside of aliens. If you're not familiar with Bob Lazar, in 1989 he did an interview where he said that he worked for a government agency to try and reverse engineer alien ships of some sort. I think they were aliens. Joe Rogan's podcast with him is amazing, just for its entertainment value. Like, seriously.
No. It's not just amazing for its entertainment value. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is why I'm starting to get angry. Because he's talking skittles and rainbows. He's describing these people as lunatics. And then he describes the whole Joe Rogan podcast not as something of invaluable knowledge that you may not have ever come across. Instead, he says, oh, it was like entertainment. Hey, could you bring the popcorn? Let's bring some more soda, to this little screening event. Sorry, let's just play on.
You should definitely check it out. Bob Lazar, Joe Rogan, do the Google search. It's really, really fascinating stuff. It's like almost 3 hours long. I don't really believe the story. He claims that he worked at this facility, he saw the tech, and then he came out, did an interview, blew the whistle. But I also kind of feel like it's probably infinitely more likely if it did happen.
First of all, there's no such thing as infinitely more likely. It could be like a lot more likely, but infinitely more likely. And I just, this is like the third time that he's like referred to this. And I want to know, based on what evidence? What is it that he came across that makes him absolutely certain that all of this is imagination and that aliens cannot exist? If I were to just extrapolate very, very quickly, aliens are simply an extrapolation of ourselves. We assume that we don't know how life was created. We simply know that we were suddenly here on this planet. And we know that we became very smart enough to create rocket ships that eventually can go to space. So to extrapolate that there might be another anthropomorphical biological unit from a mid-level gravity planet that has probably a landmass type creature that might be humanoid, I don't think that extrapolation is very far, especially when just our galaxy alone has billions of Earth-like planets, or at least planets that are in the habitable zone. So why is this so crazy? Why, when hundreds of years ago we were just riding horses, and now we are creating quantum computers that literally uses parallel universes to try to ingest more calculations in our given unit of time here on this reality. If we're doing this type of work, what in the world makes you think that science is suddenly going to stop? Nobody in the history of any anthropomorphical biological unit type based creature will ever discover a way to circumvent the space-time issue, even though mathematically it's possible. I don't know where these people are coming from. I don't know where Tim comes from when he says that there's no, oh, it's all Skittles, it's all rainbow. I mean, are you just quoting like 1980 like physicists? Or are you doing your own rational thinking with this one? Because I haven't heard a single example of why he believes this. All right, let's just play on.
More likely, if it did happen, the government was just tricking him with smoke and mirrors so that he would run to the press and claim this technology existed because it was during the Cold War. Psyops were abound. In fact, some people have argued that it was actually the Russians doing a psyop on us so that we spend resources on nonsense thinking we found alien ships or something.
Okay, so first of all, I want to make 2 points here. If it was psyops due to the Cold War, then the type of evidence that we're talking about, I mean, how would the Russians have created some of the mechanisms that were being utilized in S4, which is next to Area 51? How would the Russians have put this object for the United States government to uncover that produces its own gravity, that is being studied by researchers, and it's all some like very well elaborate like smoke and mirrors type trick? Okay, can we start using some logic here? I understand that there is psyops. In fact, let me show you an example of what I believe might be psyops. If you go to the CIA website, and I went myself and I discovered a document, okay? According to this document, it says that UFOs, and this came from the KGB after the USSR was dismantled, and it's according to this document, some Russian soldier attempted to shoot down an alien UFO that was spotted in a military base in Siberia. And apparently, upon trying to destroy the craft churned all the soldiers, except for the soldiers in the shadow, into stone. Like Medusa style into stone. I'm not joking about this. This is an actual file. But in this file, it says here, if the KGB file corresponds to reality, this is extremely menacing case. Okay, if it extends to reality, this could be smoke and mirrors. This could be Psyops, where the Russian is making up a file that eventually gets in the CIA hands, and the CIA is unable to interpret or is unable to say for certain whether this file was from a legitimate case or not. This is Psyops. Putting a physical item that reproduces gravity to a physicist in an underground base, that is not Psyops. I'm sorry. Let's try to use a little bit of logical deduction here. And it comes straight from the CIA's website. All right, let's move on. Let's play on.
And then we spin our wheels doing nothing. Or it could be that the U.S. stages these things so that Russians get scared we have advanced technology and they won't know what it is, causing them to panic. We really don't know. But I'll tell you this, during the Cold War, a PSYOP is infinitely more likely than we actually discovered 9 alien ships and then hired people to try and, reverse engineer them.
Actually, technically, according to Bob Lazar, it was 7 that were discovered that might have been archaeological discoveries. The other 2 look like they might have been shot down, just to be more specific with the details.
But anyway, it's really, really fascinating. I also want to point out this is a hilarious photo that we see all the time. So let's take a look at...
See what I'm saying? This is a hilarious photo we see all the time. Let's talk about skittles and rainbows. Let's talk about these infinitely less likely to happen. I mean, come on, man. This is like so egotistically driven. It's so obvious that he thinks of anybody who believes in aliens to be at a lower class of intelligence and logical deduction. That's not true, man. M. Night Shyamalan made that movie, Signs. They were making fun of that tinfoil hat joke. But guess what? UFOs and aliens are slowly, from the public opinion, turning out to be as real as the airplanes that fly above us. So some people might have overreacted to the information that nobody else was willing to accept or to talk about in public circles. But that doesn't mean these are a low class of intelligence, man. Some of these people might have been overly perceptive. Some of these people might have had schizophrenia. True. Some of these people might have mental diseases. True. And mental disease might make you have the propensity to believe in all kinds of weird things. Maybe you believe in werewolves, witches, I don't know, UFOs, aliens, anything that is external from reality. The point is, there are very intelligible individuals who have been at this topic for a while, who have been censored way more than you think, Tim. And I'm telling you, we're not all Skittles and rainbows. We're not living in Care Bear land. We're not idiots, man.
So let's take a look at, again, the reason I'm bringing this up is Bob Lazar's story is fascinating. I don't necessarily believe it. I'm not saying he's a liar or anything like that. I'm just saying, we'll see evidence. But we keep seeing stories about UFOs. And then we get a story about people actually seeing unidentified flying objects. Coincidence? Yeah, probably. If people are hearing...
So what he's trying to refer to here is this zeitgeist. He has this belief that because people are talking about UFO in the news, because he made a video on UFOs, that now UFOs are suddenly going to get spotted all over the world. Okay, so maybe he's right. Maybe there is some kind of like copycat effect that happens with people when they're talking about certain phenomenons in this culture. It's called water cooler conversations. That's why everybody knows the ending of Lost, right after the season finale. That's because people are all tapping to the same source of information that they want to be able to have discussions about. So yeah, that exists. And he might actually be right in asserting that this Kansas UFO is bogus. But it doesn't detract away from the Bob Lazar story. And he's using this as an example to show how after he talks about UFOs, people will suddenly see UFOs. So that must mean that Bob Lazar was full of shit. Okay, so we did our own analysis of...
All right.
I don't want to... Look, I haven't asked the person for permission for the video, so I don't want to show the whole video. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you segments of it. So here is the orb that the person captured. So I just kind of play quickly without sound, just to give you guys a sense of what was captured. You can see the 2 orbs right there. So, definitely looks kind of interesting. The only thing is that DARPA released a statement that they had released balloons. I believe it was like a day or 2 before in Maryland. So the question is, could these be DARPA balloons or are these UFOs? Now, I did a quick analysis on Photoshop. Now, first of all, somebody made an interesting comment here that these balloons were supposedly released on the 17th, but that there was a storm from the 17th to the 21st that was blowing from west to east. So anything that was released in Maryland, there's no way that it would have been able to get to Kansas City 3 days later. But here's the thing, is most storms, most of the circulation of the winds of storms are happening in the troposphere. And these balloons are, I believe they get up to like 70,000 feet. So these balloons are technically in a stratosphere. So I don't know if the storm direction will ultimately affect the direction of where the balloon is going to end up, because I think that there is almost an inverse reaction to the winds from the stratosphere to the troposphere at times. So whereas one storm could be going one way, the wind direction from the 70,000 feet and above could be actually going a different direction. So to me, that wasn't conclusive evidence that this is not a balloon. So I went ahead and I went to Photoshop and I analyzed this. Now, if you're rooting for this to be a UFO, sadly to say, it doesn't appear to be anything extremely anomalous, at least from my perspective. So if I zoom in real quick, here's the channel mixing to try to get the pixels to stick out a little bit more. I increase the image size, increase the levels. Now check this out. As I zoom out with the increased contrast and increased size, you see this indentation, right? That doesn't look like one of those perfect orbs. But what I found even more impressive is the shape. Look at this. And you see how the shape kind of tapers off in the bottom. And if you analyze the balloons from DARPA, they look rather similar. So by using image size filter, we can actually see that these things that were captured in Kansas City might have actually been the DARPA balloon. And Tim Pool might be right in stating that these Kansas City are not UFOs, they're balloons. But what I do find interesting is that Tim Pool is trying to use this as an example of why Bob Lazar is not right. And I think that's just completely bogus, because we've debunked UFOs on this channel before. This isn't the first one. So just because you can debunk a UFO doesn't mean that all the UFO stories are bogus. And I just need to be really clear about that point.
News nonstop that aliens are being seen. They're now looking for it. It's like that old joke goes that, you buy a car and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere. Because, as the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. Well, in sight, in mind, I guess. Let's read the story and see exactly what was going on with these UFOs. He says, folks in the Midwestern city didn't call it the special FBI agents from... Okay, that's enough of the joke. They went to the media. CNN affiliate KMBC reported numerous calls from viewers seeking an explanation. Joe Loria, a meteorologist at WDAF, another CNN affiliate, said the strange objects could be part of Project Loon. That's Google's the Google project that seeks to bring attention to rural and remote areas by launching huge...
Okay, so I'm going to stop it right here because I think it's become obvious to us that that this is probably a balloon, and he is just simply going to state this to be a balloon and then use that to redirect the conversation to say conspiracy people are nuts. I'm going to keep playing because I don't know if there's anything else.
Next to that theory, the Navy does not believe aliens have been flying around U.S. airspace. Well, who knows? I think aliens is probably not the case. Look, man, I really doubt that all of the global leaders got together and decided they could keep this under wraps. I really doubt there's...
It's not about that. It's not about keeping all the world leaders under wraps. It's about keeping just a few individuals and intelligence agencies from compartmentalizing the information and keeping the information from the rest of the congressmen or the rest of the individuals. Why do you think there are people who are having congressional meetings with Congress? Because even if you're a senator or congressman or woman, you may not be privy to this information. And whoever said it was government? If you look at Bob Bigelow and Bigelow Aerospace, who works in tangent with NASA, who came out in 60 Minutes with Laura Logan, stating that UFOs are real, that is a private organization. That is not a government organization. So who said that people have to rile up all these government agencies and basically shut them all up? I just don't know why he has to assume that.
In black organization doing this stuff because we just want it to be true because it would make life more exciting.
Okay, enough. Okay, enough. I can't handle it anymore. My head's gonna blow up. My head's literally gonna blow up. I cannot handle somebody who is not actively being censored like we are, saying this garbage. And look, I really, really actually respect Tim a lot. I really like the guy. I wouldn't be watching his channel almost every day if I didn't respect his work. But when talking about UFOs, he's talking garbage. And it's really hard to watch somebody talking garbage to the tunes of 100 times more audience than you get. And you've been trying to report on this for years and years and years. And here's somebody regurgitating stuff coming out from somebody who, at least in this topic, is just a dilettante. So yeah, okay, so to sum this up, Kansas City UFO, probably just a balloon. Bob Lazar, probably not Russian ops. Does it mean that Russia doesn't do Psyops in Cold War? No, we have potential proof here. I'm not saying that it is 100% proof, but this is either a Medusa-like alien turning people into stone, or this is a Psyops emanating from the KGB. So Psyops happened. Yes, the Kansas City balloons could have been just balloons. It does not mean that Bob Lazar was wrong. It doesn't mean that this man was tricked. A man who can build a rocket car was tricked into believing that some object that he got to have hands-on experience with was producing gravity. Okay, he believed that he was doing his own experiments to try to figure out whether this produces gravity. This is not somebody standing in the corner of a room and watching a magic trick. So I apologize about that. We might have had a technical difficulty with the video camera. I'm not going to re-record the entire rants because a lot of that came from my heart. So to give you a brief background of what this document means or what is happening here, in 1952, there was a mass sighting that happened over the Washington, D.C. area in, I believe it was in the early month of July. Now, this was a very interesting case because it wasn't just that these UFOs were witnessed over Washington, D.C., but some of them were actually witnessed over the White House itself. And it was probably the first mass sighting to happen outside of the Battle of Los Angeles, that one UFO sighting that happened right at the onset of World War II in LA. So indeed, it's a very interesting case, but it's particularly of interest to us because it appears that the government had set up a panel, it's called the Robertson's Panel in 1953, to essentially study this wave of UFOs. Now, if you're aware, the government has already published I believe it's like over 300 pages. I don't know how big it is. It looks like a giant Bible. But this book basically is the Air Force's recommendation that UFOs are most likely not of scientific value. So basically kind of stating to the skeptic, hey, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to worry about. That is called the Condon Report. It was created in 1968 by the Air Force. The problem with the Condon Report is that right prior to the publication of the Condon Report, there was a lot of interest from the Air Force to obtain information from the CIA regarding what had occurred in 1953 with the Robertson's panel that was set up, the scientific panel that was set up to study the wave of UFOs in 1952 that went over the White House. So in trying to get that information, the Air Force was continually being blocked, stymied, just completely not given all the information that they needed to properly conduct the scientific research with their Condon reports. And I believe that this was all happening around 1964. So in trying to get that information, there was a series of correspondences, and that's part of that 57-page document that I was telling you about. And in this correspondences, you can tell that the Air Force was getting visibly frustrated. Finally, on page 11, the CIA admits, and I quote, "We are most anxious that further publicity not be given to the information that the panel was sponsored by the Central Intelligence Agency." Let me repeat. We're most anxious that further publicity not be given to the information that this panel was sponsored by the Central Intelligence Agency. The panel they're talking about is the Robertson's panel. In other words, the scientific panel that was established to study the wave of UFOs that happened over the White House was not scientific at all. It was set up by the CIA. And then to top that off, the 1968 report that UFO skeptics often use as their holy Bible to say that, look, UFOs don't exist because the government already did a full report on this. Well, that full report was also not scientific, because all the information that the Air Force was given was essentially either redacted or just not given. As is stating here, that the CIA was very anxious that the public would eventually find out that their panel was sponsored by them. Is this not an admission of sorts? Is this not a smoking gun that almost proves the CIA has been tampering with this UFO topic and thought of it to be way more than weather balloons way back, even as far back as 1950s? So that is the big file that I want to share with you guys. I will leave the link above. And if you guys didn't catch, we did have a remote viewing winner from last week. Somebody had picked a lighthouse when a remote viewing target was a picture of San Francisco with Coit Tower in the background. Now, Coit Tower is a lighthouse. Now, for all intents and purposes, because of the rarity of lighthouse, I went ahead and gave that a hit. So I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to his material over there. Definitely check it out to support the Second Earth community. I will have a new remote viewing card on the next episode. And definitely, guys and gals, please comment below. I would really like to hear you guys' thoughts on this topic and what is happening with the quote-unquote zeitgeist of ufology right now. Thank you so much for joining me. I apologize about my angry little rants. It's been too long, too many years, too many frustrations, too many blockages, and then to have somebody who has 100 times your audience pop up with the same topic and be like, oh, it's just Skittles and rainbow. Sorry. I'm sorry. I had to say something. Thank you for joining me again. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.